What's up, guys? In today's talk, I'll be discussing hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, and I'll be discussing what the drugs are and also the two studies that actually kickstarted the whole research investigation into what they are and how they work against COVID-19. So I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching. So hydroxychloroquine is an orally prescribed medication. It was approved in 1955 and it was approved to treat malaria patients, but it's also being used to treat people with systemic lupus erythematosus, also known as lupus, also to treat rheumatoid arthritis, which is another autoimmune disease. The FDA has approved of hydroxychloroquine as an emergency use treatment options for doctors. And again, emergency being emergency. So as you can see by the CDC website, clinical treatment options for COVID-19 include Remedisvir, hydroxychloroquine, and there are other options as well. Clinicaltrials.gov gives you a list of all the studies that are currently ongoing around the world, happening in Canada, France, Germany, China, plenty of states in the United States. So I want to specifically look into a French study led by the Dior Raoult. I hope I pronounced that right. He actually published two different studies looking into the role of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin in a patient population in his hospital in France. And it was popularized there late in March. So here's the abstract. It says, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine have been found to be efficient on SARS-CoV-2 and reported to be efficient in Chinese COVID-19 patients. We evaluate the role of hydroxychloroquine on respiratory viral loads. SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus causing COVID-19. COVID-19 is the name of the disease. Similar to the way HIV is the name of a virus that causes AIDS, AIDS being the disease. In the study, 600 milligrams of hydroxychloroquine were given to the patients daily, and depending on their clinical presentation, azithromycin was also given, and he took daily swabs to pretty much just tell what their viral load was, which is supposed to be a predictor of their stage in the disease, so how severe they are. In his study, he makes a valid point. France has been facing an onslaught of COVID-19 with more than 25,000 cases as of March 26. And therefore, there's a critical and urgent need for effective treatments in order to cure symptomatic patients, but also to decrease the duration of the virus carriage and thus limit transmission in the community. Repositioning old drugs for use as an antiviral treatment is an interesting strategy because knowledge about these drugs, safety profile, side effects, posology, and drug interactions are already well known. What he's saying is that we need to be seeing if past drugs that we have already created could be repositioned or, reused off-label prescribed to patients. Off-label prescribing being taking a drug that has an intended purpose for a different disease and has been studied for that disease to be working, and taking that drug and using it for this new disease and studying it and seeing how effective it is. Right now, we don't know exactly how effective it is, but he's going to say in this study that it's effective. So there are two major problems with his study. The first one was that he only had 36 patients to study from, and he had to further divide those between treatment group and control group. And 36 patients does not really represent the entire population of France, nonetheless the world. So that's a huge problem. But an even bigger problem was the fact that he didn't randomly assign his patients into different groups. He chose who was in the treatment group and who was in the control group. The control group receiving a placebo, not the treatment. If anything, it could have been a sugar pill. At the end of the day, it affects the results because you don't know if the drug is actually having its intended effect because the drug is better than placebo, or just because you just chose the people in group A that were healthier or going to be better responsive to this drug, and that's the reason why this drug is working. But that aside, I'm going to go ahead and talk about his second study a little bit. He does bring in more patients. There were over 70 patients. Unfortunately, he didn't get it peer reviewed, which is not a good thing. He does make good points though, understanding that hydroxychloroquine is a drug that has side effects. He says in his discussion that because of anecdotal reports of heart complications with such drugs in patients with underlying conditions, it would be useful to perform an EKG before or after the beginning of the treatment, allowing for the early detection and treatment of these rare but possible cardiac side effects. Azithromycin is the drug that has been the most widely prescribed against respiratory infections. So he makes a point about the side effects, which is a good thing to bring up because a known side effect is heart arrhythmias, cardiac arrhythmias, and then some monitoring patients that are taking these drugs before and after taking an EKG also known as ECG, is really vital because you don't want to cause more harm to the patient. And just so you know, azithromycin is a strong antibiotic. And in this case, I believe it's being used to prevent pneumonia. And treating pneumonia is one of the two major challenges in treating COVID-19. Physicians are looking for treatments that can target moderate to severe cases early enough before they can develop more serious or irreversible conditions. So right now, Dr. Rahu in his study claimed that this drug therapy combination actually improved the outcomes of every single one of his participants except for one. And to top it off, he goes on to say that these improvements were significant because he compares it to the natural evolution of the disease in patients that don't receive treatments and compares that to his own cohort. So that's important to note because patients do just naturally get better. So comparing that to a standard is a good thing to do. However, the lack of a control group in his study, meaning he didn't actually have a non-treatment group like he did in his first study, led to other scientists and other researchers to not view his study as valid because a control group or a randomized clinical control trial is the standard of practice and the gold standard of research. So that's one reason why you might hear that his research study was discredited. So that's Dr. Rahu's study, but he did get the idea for investigating hydroxychloroquine from a different study in Wuhan University in China. If you didn't know this, Wuhan, China was ground zero for the epidemic, the pandemic. And they looked at hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin because they found that hydroxychloroquine, at least in vitro, meaning like a little petri dish, worked well against the virus. Wuhan University did find that hydroxychloroquine combined with azithromycin was working well in patients. But what I found even more interesting than the results was a survey they conducted from lupus patients. They found that 80 patients that had lupus and were taking long-term hydroxychloroquine didn't test positive with COVID-19, as opposed to the patients, well over 100 patients that were in the hospital and did test positive for COVID-19. So it makes you think, hey, maybe hydroxychloroquine has some prophylactic properties where you're not contracting the disease. Whatever the science is, it seems like so patients that have been taking long-term hydroxychloroquine aren't as susceptible. And this, I'm sure, inspired lots of other clinical research studies out there, including Dr. Rahu. And it really fascinated me because imagine that, 80 patients taking hydroxychloroquine in the long term, not contracting COVID-19. It seems like a big coincidence. Maybe it was luck, maybe not. So I decided to check out a different study or different surveys to see if this was true, titled Hydroxychloroquine and Other Autoimmune Drugs Don't Fully Protect Against Coronavirus, Early Data Suggests. And in the article, it goes on to show a collection of data that found that 5 patients that were taking long-term hydroxychloroquine, patients that were dealing with rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, ended up being diagnosed with COVID-19. And a separate survey that found that 190 patients that were taking long-term hydroxychloroquine also tested positive for COVID-19. Interestingly enough, in this same article, there is a rheumatologist by the name of Daniel Wallace, which found that in his hospital in Cedar Mount Sinai Medical Center, that out of the 800 patients that he was caring for since September that had lupus and were taking long-term hydroxychloroquine, he didn't know any of them that had COVID-19 as of yet, as of sometime early April. He does say that this might be the luck of the draw. It might be just random chance. Also, he says that, we got to keep an open mind. And for whatever reason, this drug might have some type of properties that didn't cause them to get severely sick. Just like many of you, I don't have all the answers. And it does, at least from this article, show you that it's not 100% a prophylactic. It's not going to prevent you from getting the disease. It might be a treatment option that prevents you from getting from moderate to worse. There is anecdotal evidence to show that it is working. And anecdotal evidence doesn't mean strong evidence, but it is evidence right now that desperate doctors are looking at for a treatment option right now for patients that don't have much to go by. So it's not the only one out there. There's also plasma injections that doctors are looking at using antibodies of patients that have already contracted the disease, and also using different settings and ventilators, using different settings from high flow oxygen delivery devices. So this isn't the only option out there. There's also other drugs that have been used, other antivirals that have been used in the past that are being studied.
The data shows that Remedisvir has a clear-cut, significant positive effect in diminishing the time to recovery. the time to recovery being shorter in the remdesivir arm, it was 11 days compared to 15 days. Although a 31% improvement doesn't seem like a knockout 100%, it is a very important proof of concept, because what it is proven is that a drug can block this virus. The mortality rate trended towards being better in the sense of less deaths in the remdesivir group, 8% versus 11% in the placebo group. It has not yet reached statistical significance, but the data needs to be further analyzed.
I do want to talk about, what does it mean to be scientifically sound? What does it mean to have scientifically sound evidence? Well, that takes a randomized control trial. That takes a large sample size of well over 80 patients or more. It takes also a long period of time to study patients over the course of months. And for example, a Rutgers University study, which is looking at 160 patients right now at University Hospital in Newark and also in New Brunswick, their study is not going to be completed until April 30th, 2021. That's a long term. That's a long time from now. So I understand the frustration with having an evidence-based drug, but not having that evidence until a year from now. So this is the reason why hydroxychloroquine has been touted as a great drug and also being touted as a baloney or not, or just overhyped. So this kind of explains it. It's not the strong evidence that we would like it to be. And unfortunately, we're dealing with a short amount of time right now because patients are exponentially getting infected. The good news right now is that it does seem like there are a lot of silent carriers of this disease, meaning that a lot of people are getting infected and not manifesting symptoms, which might point to a lower death rate than initially expected, which I'm really hopeful for. But in terms of hospital capacity, we need to continue doing what we need to do to continue making sure that equipment is there, that personnel are well trained, that personnel are kept safe and from exposure from COVID-19. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I really put a lot of time and effort researching every single article, making sure that I give you a balanced perspective on things. And if you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. I really appreciate that, and I'll see you next time.